Um, Cooperation being always or almost always impossible, high numbers there, 61%. And this is a significant one because it's 2 times as likely to be happening in a terminated case than in a difficult case that's settled, that they had a problem with cooperation. Unilateral actions was another issue there, or unrealistic outcome, not process, but outcome at this point, expectations, or that the parties went outside to get advice, some shadow advisors or other professional advisors, or they were identified as having some mental health issues. Those are the factors that occurred. They were more likely than not to be present in a terminated case, and they were found to be more probable in the cases that terminated than the difficult cases that settled. But there are some other factors that we know contributed to termination, but they don't occur in more than half the cases that terminate. For instance, threats to go to court happen twice as often in the cases that terminate. That makes sense. They not only threatened, they did decide to go to court. Or that they might say that they had there was a reluctance to disclose information. That happens twice as often in your terminated cases. That may be why they terminate and go, is to get that information they're seeking that they're not getting in the process for some reason. It terminates it. Unrealistic process expectations occur and cause or terminate or more probable in termination cases. We only found one substance factor that seemed to make a difference, and that was valuation, the marital property valuation. If there are big arguments over what something is valued at, those cases tend to terminate more than the difficult cases that settled. We found that verbal abuse was twice as likely in the terminated cases than in the difficult cases that settled, but still it only occurred in about 1/3 of the terminated cases. And we found invasion of privacy was twice as likely to happen. And there was only one professional factor that was identified. That means all these others had to do with family dynamics, or in the one case, the substance, marital property valuation. But in terms of having a professional contribution to it, the only one that seemed to be identified by the reporters was that there were different professional approaches or styles. And that happened twice as likely in the cases that were difficult to terminate than the cases that settled. But still, it only happened in 1/4 of the terminated cases that there was an identification of the factor that someone had a different style, which tells me that we need to be paying attention to, do we have the same approach when we come in working with a couple? Are we on the same page professionally with our styles? And because it will help them to stay in the process if we are. And then we can probably warn our clients about some of these other factors and say, the handwriting's on the wall when you don't disclose information, or you aren't cooperating, or you have these unrealistic, unachievable outcome or process expectations. Those are the cases that we find are leaving the process. And if you don't drift into those kinds of behaviors, then probably things will be better for you. We've looked at a lot of different issues, how the process differs depending on whether the case terminated or not. One of the things that I didn't know that we would have expected to find is that in the terminated cases, they're more likely to have more mental health professional fees higher. That means they spent more time with them. It's more likely that there was a therapist involved with that couple who was not a core professional, not involved as a team member, but working with them. Goes back to the issue that, and more than likely than not, that mental health issues are an issue for those families. And there were more likely going to be more meetings with the mental health professional and the clients without the other team members. So what I'm hearing from that is that mental health professionals are getting more involved in the difficult and terminated cases to try to keep them in the process and to help them work out. Another thought that I guess we didn't expect this. Hypothetically, you would think that if there are children involved, they'd much more likely want to stay in the process, and it would be the cases without the children that would be more likely to terminate. Actually, there is the 92% of the cases that terminated had children involved. That's compared to 84% of our other cases. So that didn't keep them out. But all of this has to be taken into the context that only 10% of the cases terminate. We now have enough of a sampling of the terminated cases because of the way that the survey is designed that we can draw some conclusions about it. But that represents such a small portion of the cases that we're looking at anyway. But we're looking at a much bigger sample when we look at 40% of the cases that are difficult. Because then we can compare them with the 21% that are easy and draw some differences there. Difficult cases were more likely than easy cases to have an MHP involved, to have an FP involved, a financial professional, to have a team model approach, and to take longer. That makes sense. When they're hard cases, you're going to bring more resources to bear on them. And there was an interesting point, though, that in the terminated cases, they were more likely than the difficult cases that settled to be in that group. It's a small group, but that actually finishes in less than 3 months. And I think that's because they probably pulled the plug on it very quickly when they realized this case is not going to be able to stay in the process. That may be a good thing, that there are 26% of those terminated cases finished in less than 3 months, compared to about 14% in the different cases, than in all cases. Then we have cost data. This didn't come as a surprise to anyone that difficult cases are more likely to cost more. And but I guess what we took away from that is that the total fees are likely to be 2.5 times the easy case cost. That's significant. So when they come in with all these challenging factors, they can expect to pay considerably more. And that would be good to inform them that no, your case is not going to be on the lower end because we've identified these pretty significant issues for you to have to manage. Easy cases are more likely than difficult cases, on the other hand, to have been those cases where only lawyers were involved. 60% of the cases that are easy had only lawyers involved. They're also more likely to not have needed or are involved in a mental health professional because they were so easy, I guess. 77% of them did. And the easy cases lasted less than 6 months. That's like 75% of them were over in less than 6 months. But if you looked at the difficult cases, only about a third of them were over in less than 6 months. So we're seeing some trends there that I think are pretty significant. We also are noticing that the functions of what the different professionals do differs depending on whether or not the case is difficult. And just picking out one of the professions, if you looked at the mental health professionals, would you not be, this just doesn't seem surprising to me, but mental health professionals are more likely to respond to crises between meetings in these terminated cases than they are in all settled cases. They'll have to do that in about 70% of the terminated cases. Obviously, there's problems percolating in those cases, and they're bringing in the mental health professional to try to help keep it in the process, I'm sure. They're also more likely to refer to appropriate resources than they have to in terminated cases than in settled cases, because in settled cases they may not need those additional resources. But what I see is over and over the mental health professionals are being brought to do the hard work to try to help these people get to the end. And in a few cases, 10% of the cases, that's not going to happen potentially. We've also done a little bit of work on looking at the financial professional this time that we hadn't before. And because we now have a good enough sample that we can really study that, I think the most striking thing about the financial professional issue is how different it is regionally. That between 47% overall involving financial professionals. In the United States, that's 50%. But you can look at a place like Texas, 70%, Georgia, 95%, or you can go to Canada and only 18% involve a financial professional.